Welcome to the Unique Beginning and Meditation Podcast. We are continuing our journey through our chakra conversations with my good friend Danielle Graham from Divine Clarity. And today we visit the heart chakra. I have an affinity for the heart chakra. I feel like she deserves, in my Unique Chakra Series course, she deserves a night all her own because I feel like our heart chakra is one of our most powerful chakras. Um, just to touch base on a little bit about the heart chakra, of course, it happens here at the heart in this whole area here, front and back in our bodies. It deals with things like love, grief, forgiveness, some of the more deeper, complex emotions. I personally feel like our heart helps us dive into those emotions and process them better. I feel like the heart is the go-between or the center point between our physical body chakras, which we have talked about, and our spiritual body chakras, which we will talk about. Um, the heart actually has a electromagnetic field all its own that can be measured sometimes up to 3 feet from the body. And they're finding that there's some activity in the heart that is similar to activity in the brain. So they're learning more and more the powerful energy that comes from our heart. And I could dive into the conversation about the energy from our heart because I have some thoughts on that and the afterlife, but we'll save that for another podcast. Love, grief, heart, lungs, some of the shoulders, upper back, things like that are all part of the heart process. I don't remember the gland that it deals with right now, but I got that in my course information.
Yeah.
Um,
How about the rib cage, esophagus?
oh, yep. See? Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And the colors pink and green are usually the colors in the heart chakra. I also feel like the
Mhm.
color gold is a powerful color within the heart chakra. Um, I appreciate some energy work I did recently where I got to have the visual of gold light infusing through the tissues of a little heart. And that was a really cool visual that connected this idea of the heart chakra. So just a bit of basic information or yeah, a little bit above basic information about the heart chakra. Welcome, Danielle. How are you doing today?
I'm good. You got this. Keep going. I'm
Uh,
wonderful. Thank you.
so we didn't introduce ourselves. Um, but you can go back and watch the other episodes if you want to get to know about Danielle. We'll share some really great information about how to get a hold of her and some of the stuff we're doing at the end of the podcast. So stay with us. And if you have not visited with the other episodes, we're on episode 5, I do believe. The
I
first
think
one
so.
was a
Yes.
general conversation about chakras. The second one was root. Then we went to sacral. Then we went to solar. And now we're on to heart. And just as a reminder, these are our conversations about our experiences personally and professionally with the heart chakra. Things that we've witnessed in our own experiences and we've witnessed in others. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. We're not looking to counteract any other learning or any other traditions or celebrations that are out there. We're just sharing our stuff. And if you want to dive in deeper to this work, reach out to either of us and we'll let you know what's an option. Very cool. So I have all sorts of ideas about the heart chakra and I don't want to babble too much. So tell
You
me a little bit
go for
about.
it. Just do your thing. That's what we're here for. I'm learning too. We're always learning.
I I just feel like the heart for me is a cornerstone of how I started my training. I did the Inner Light Practitioner's course from Beth Lynch way back in 2011. And she has a heart light meditation that was an initial, like, that's the initial piece for me. In the idea that our heart is the powerhouse of our energy and our soul. I feel like it helps to shift this energy and I feel like it helps us dive into our this emotional awareness and it deals with love and grief and forgiveness, which are way more complex emotions that sit underneath some of those initial emotions like anger and frustration and jealousy. So I feel like she takes what we experience in the other chakras and is like, okay, let's open it up and look at it deeper. And I don't know, I feel like when I'm doing energy work, of often, if I'm working on a chakra, say the solar plexus, I'll work on the chakra, the heart, and the solar plexus at the same time. Or I'll work
Mhm.
on the heart and the brow at the same time because there's an energy exchange there where she's that light, that energy in your heart is helping regulate the energies in the rest of your body. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I was just thinking, I think we talked about this yesterday a little. I don't know if I got your opinion on this, but I was thinking like the sacral chakra is more our reaction to that deep emotion that we're feeling. So like you said, when we're angry, when we're lashing out, when we're frustrated, those are the all sacral chakra emotions. But really, when you sit with it to find what's causing all of those emotions, that's what's coming from the heart. And that's fear or grief or whatever it is. Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Um, yeah, exactly. The reaction, the raw emotion that initially happens, is more sacral chakra. Um,
Mhm.
I feel like, again, I'm going back to this movie. Apparently, I gotta watch it again. I cry every
Mhm.
time I watch that movie Inside Out. And I feel like the first one, when you have joy and sadness, and how they start working, spoiler alert, how they start working together at the end is like, that's what happens in the heart. You know, like that moment when you've been struggling with this notion, and then all of a sudden, like it bursts open and you break down, and then you feel more open and free afterwards. To me, that's big energy moving through your heart and healing. And I don't know. I really think those moments are kind of juicy. But yes,
Right.
I love that.
I mean, that's
So,
a, you can look at that in any situation. If somebody passes and you're grief stricken. I mean, even I've watched it here happen in my chair in my office, and people who come in so consumed with their grief and then get that contact, that message from their loved one, that validation that their loved one is still around, maybe some answers to questions that they still had, but you can almost see the relief in the heart chakra because of the emotions from the sacral chakra being
right.
released, being processed, being healed.
Yep. And I know that when we experience anxiety, we talked about in the solar plexus how some of that anxiety shows up there. And I
Mhm.
know we'll probably talk about it in the brow too, but I feel like there's some that happens in the heart, but I don't know if it's so much, I don't know, I guess it's not the same as feeling and experiencing the anxiety. It's that the heart is, it almost feels like the anxiety in the heart is the heart craving to be heard on a deeper level. Does that make sense?
Yes, I've only experienced something like that so deep or so strong once, so it's kind of hard, and it was a long time ago. So it's hard for me to kind of go back and really feel like it was. So I don't feel like it was mine, and maybe that's why I can't connect to it either. When I very first started reading people professionally, one of my very first ones, I believe I took on her energy because I had had what was later supposedly diagnosed as a anxiety attack, but I thought for sure I was having a heart attack.
Hmm.
And three times I went to the emergency room and they're like, lady, there is nothing wrong with your heart. But, within talking to some people and a mentor of mine, she was like, I really think you took on this person's energy. And then later talking to her, she told me she suffered from panic attacks.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that relates to what you were saying now. I'm kind of totally lost.
No, that makes perfect sense. I like the way you describe that. And I guess I can't peg it as any anxiety that's happening in the heart is something that needs to be addressed. But I think that I think it's an acknowledgement of balance we get to find in our heart.
Mhm.
Um, I know when yeah, I feel like sometimes empaths and people that are more sensitive, like you said, like you describe in your experience, when we take on this energy physically or emotionally from others, I feel like sometimes that's a lot for us to process through. And it makes sense that our heart would be confused in that almost because it's not something that we are experiencing as far as a soul level lesson, but it's something that we're experiencing exterior. Does that?
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
totally.
I I do want to share one thing that I've noticed in my work, and I think I've mentioned this in the root chakra, but um, because life has been rather intense for the past 5 years, and because so many people have had so much going on in their life for the past 4 or 5 years, I feel like a lot of people have gotten so that we naturally are shutting our heart down, not by a choice of our own, not like an active that's it, I'm done, I'm just shutting my heart down, but with the busyness of life and the intensity of what we've been going through, people are not slowing down to process and to feel and to be in their heart, and they're more surviving versus
Mhm.
thriving. And I think the heart allows us to thrive. Like we talk about getting out of our head and getting into our heart, listening to our heart, and we've kind of stopped listening. And
Mhm.
when we shut down our heart, our other chakras have a tendency to take over,
Mhm.
and they're meant to support each other, but the other chakras can't do the work of the heart long term because the heart is a powerhouse and she has her own process. So when these other chakras try to do the work of the heart long term, it's like they get thrown off balance and things happen. Like we talked about, one thing that you mentioned before we connected, Danielle, in your notes is some of the psychological disorders that happen can actually be a bit of a heart chakra issue,
Mhm.
or that anxiety that we feel in our stomach that can also be in the heart. And my theory is that when we shut down our heart and these other chakras take over and they become imbalanced, that's where these things start to show up, like the anxiety in the gut or the anxiety in the head or those more psychological disorders or those more physical pain start showing up because we've shut that heart down. And that's
Mhm.
a bit of a tangent, but does that make sense?
Absolutely, 100%. I don't feel it was a tangent at all. I mean, to me, you're expressing everything I'm seeing here as well. So, I mean, it's just validation that it's happening all over the place. I do feel like people are in that fight or flight. And even something came up recently, like a week or two ago, when the whole toilet paper thing was going to start again. I don't remember what it was, but literally that morning I was at the store and people were buying toilet paper. Like there's just that fear. And I think the heart chakra has a lot to do with trust and that whole soul calmness. And I don't think people are connecting. I don't think people have that right now. You're right. We need
And
a
I
little
think
more of that.
absolutely. And I think it's that, like when you said trust, it hit a trigger with that notion of trusting our authenticity, trusting that it's safe to receive love, trusting that we can have
Mhm.
an open heart and be raw and vulnerable, and it's safe to do that. And so many of the experiences lately have told us that we're not safe. And when
Right.
we're not
Trusting you
safe,
are enough, trusting you have enough, trusting the universe will provide. Yeah.
oh, so I was talking with a friend or a client yesterday about the energy of lack. And to me, it feels like the energy of lack is one of the most intense energies that we can get stuck in, and it's hard to get
Mhm.
out of. So it totally makes sense why that energy of lack sits in the heart. Because
Mhm.
at the surface, it may be more of a life fundamental, like a lack of toilet paper, a lack of
Mhm.
funds, a lack of connection. However, at the deeper level, does it come to a space of a lack of love, a lack of acceptance, a lack of authenticity? And it's harder to pull out of that. So to me, I guess that elevates that notion of lack with those notions of grief and that that notion of lack of self-love and things like that.
Mhm.
Oh, yep. Um, just So share a couple of your experiences or one or two of your experiences with a heart chakra because I had something else I wanted to say and it's now out the window.
I mean, besides that one, I think I was thinking about the recent picking up on someone else's energy that I experienced last week. And I think that might have a little heart chakra too. But like you had said, we're going to talk about third eye a lot. I think I was up here more, in my brain, in my third eye more than heart. I mean, I can go where everyone else can go. I had a lot of loss last year, and that severely affected my heart chakra and my ability to be open and vulnerable and to live life in a heartfelt way. It's very difficult when you are grieving and when you have had so much loss in such a short period of time. Um, I don't know, do you want to talk about the work you put into it as well, or are we just talking about the
I'm good
experience
with anything.
itself? Yeah, because like I don't think, I mean, I think I was just in survival mode for a very long time. Um, and I did wear, I know I mentioned that I wore the rose quartz moon necklace a friend of mine had made. And I had that on as a reminder of my intention to continue to try to bring love in or acceptance or whatever it was I was feeling I needed at the time. But I guess for me personally, I try to anyway, bring that heart mind connection back again. I try to go inward to heal. I'm definitely not someone who reaches out to heal. So when I'm especially hurting in the heart, that's where I'm going to cocoon in and try to go inward and talk it out with myself, process it with myself and heal.
Right. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we shut down our heart energy. I feel like you
Mhm.
described it really well in what you just shared is it feels because the things that we feel in our heart are deep and profound, more so than what we process through our other chakras, it becomes like there's wounds that we carry in our heart that we're meant to look at, to heal from and move on from, because
Mm.
there's soul lessons we get to carry with us that make us more wise and stronger on a soul level. However, it's very raw and vulnerable and makes us feel exposed. And I think that
Mhm.
we've lost our ability to be in those hard emotions and move through them. So they become bigger and scarier. So we avoid them and we shut off from them. And when we shut off from those emotions, that's when we shut our heart down. I got goosebumps. Um,
Well, I also feel like when you were talking, the word shameful came. And I'm like, it's not shameful. I'm having an argument in my head. And like when you're going through that kind of emotion and being so raw, it's almost like you don't want to be vulnerable. So you don't want anybody to see you like this. You don't want anybody to think, oh, she should be over it by now. Or my favorite, which is why I went into animal grief counseling, is it's just a dog, and something like that. You should be over that. And people feel like they have to hide their grief and their pain when they're with other people. So to me, that just builds it up even more. You're not allowed to process in public. You're not allowed to grieve with other people. I mean, you
Absolutely.
are in certain circumstances, but in our heads, we think that we have to go it alone all the time because it's not acceptable.
Right. And I think there's a fine line to walk there with authentically processing it and stepping into it and then moving back. Like I feel like I know that I have gotten in this rhythm with some of those bigger heart situations where I step into a little bit and then I pull back. I step into a little bit and then I pull back. And so it feels like I'm continuously hitting those same big concepts, but then I pull back. So I think that there's
Mm.
like this isn't necessarily a conscious choice we're making on how to process these energies and how to open up our heart or close our heart off. But I think that we are continually presented with these situations, encouraged by the universe, by God, by the divine, however you celebrate an energy like that, to dive in a little bit deeper and be a little bit stronger in that so that we can learn what we're meant to learn to go through that and not continuously be triggered in such a raw way by it.
Right.
But
And
I,
I think it's just too painful to attack all at once, too.
right.
Like we need to retreat a little, regroup,
Mhm.
and go back in.
Absolutely. And I think that we need permission to get to our heart. Like I feel like that's a good chunk of what I get to do in my services as I create a space where it's safe for people to simply hang out in their energy and look at their heart and all of it and learn how to
Mm.
welcome love. Like the notion of self-love, that's great. What does that actually look like for you? The
Mhm.
notion of opening up your heart, that's great. What does that look like? Like I think those conversations are deepening now to let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's
Right.
look at what that looks like in your life. And I don't know who it was to quote it because it was on one of those random scrolls, but somewhere along the way, I heard a reel or listened to a podcast and they shared the notion of self-care isn't the act itself, it's the decision before you do the act. So
Oh, I
that
love that.
moment, right? The
Mhm.
moment that you decide to participate in that self-care or that self-love, that decision process, that's the self-care and that's the self-love. And I'm like,
That's the moment you
oh,
decide you're worth it.
yep.
Exactly. That's beautiful.
So I think that we're waking up to how do we get to get into our heart more? How do we get to get into these feels more?
Excuse me. I know boundaries is a big one I come up with against with clients that they feel like they love themselves. They are setting boundaries, but a lot of people have trouble holding them. So, you know what I mean? Like they'll say, I don't accept this or I don't want this in my life, but then they keep allowing things to happen in certain areas, maybe not in all areas. So I think, actually following through on those things are big too. That's a big heart chakra thing for me.
Okay, so see, this is where I love these conversations because for me, boundaries is completely throat chakra. The idea
Mm.
of setting your boundaries and speaking your boundaries and the idea of free will, establishing what free will looks like for you in your life, to me, it has always been a throat chakra thing, but
See,
I
but
can
is
see how they
that,
work together.
yeah, is that the deeper part and the throat chakra is the expression, just like with the sacral chakra with emotions. I can totally see that.
Absolutely. And that, yes, so like the boundary in that like you said that notion of that act of deciding before you do the self-care, the act of deciding before you do set a boundary is a notion of self-love. So that
Mm-hmm.
totally makes sense that that would be an energy that goes between the two. Multi-chakra dimension. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are talking about the notion of the heart and how it works with other chakras, like I feel like we can talk about how the heart and the brow work together because so we've heard this so many times. Get out of your head and get into your heart. Listen to
Mm-hmm.
your heart, not your head. So many times we get stuck in this rumination. And I've been in it with clients where we are ruminating and processing and we can't figure that out up here. And we need to stop trying. And we move into a meditation or an energy session where we start with the heart and then we move some of that energy and then things come to light. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that if we're talking about how those chakras work together, that notion of processing certain things through our heart versus through our head gets to be a part of that conversation,
Yeah, well, it's like in manifestation. If your heart isn't in it, it's not gonna come to fruition.
right?
Mhm. No matter what you do with your head and with your actions.
It's that authenticity. So that
Hmm.
notion of the authenticity definitely happens in the heart. Yep. And that like authentic gratitude, authentic love, authentic appreciation. That notion of gratitude's another conversation recently. I love how the universe just puts this stuff up like, here you go. Remember this from earlier? Um, gratitude's, I feel like gratitude has almost become a buzz term
Hmm.
that I think easily steps into artificial toxic positivity at times because we have to be grateful about everything all the time in order to manifest what we're looking for. Yes, and we have these things we're meant to process and heal from because that's our deeper soul journey. So like gratitudes are powerful if they're authentic.
Hmm.
And sometimes you can't be authentic. Like there's lots of times I'm not authentically grateful for my kitchen because there's too many dishes. I'm not authentically grateful for getting up at 6 in the morning with my little one.
Hmm.
But I may be grateful for the cup of coffee that helps me do it, or I may be grateful for the blanket that I get to put on at the end of the night. So it's those authentic, even micro gratitudes that sometimes are better than that long list of this is what I'm supposed to be grateful for.
Absolutely. And I also find whenever I ask someone that or when it comes up in conversation, people automatically go outside of themselves. So there has been clients that I have given homework to when I say, I need you to, name three things that you're grateful for every day about yourself. And like everything stops. They're like, what? Like, can't say your kids, can't say your job, can't say your house. What are you grateful about you? How about these strong arms that get to hold your grandchildren at night? Like things like that. People have to really stop and work on what they're grateful about themselves.
Yep. That was one of the shifting things for myself and my personal practice was bringing in two gratitudes and two values that I put in the world. And I feel
Mm.
like that's where my heart chakra and my solar plexus started doing work together on that
Yeah.
notion of lack, because there was a big lack of self love and self worth that I have. I feel like that's one of the bigger overarching energies that I'm meant to process in this life. And so that value or that gratitude for self became a key factor in that. And it's so funny that exterior gratitude we have, and it's not something we do all the time, especially now that she's in college, but at one point in time we would sit down in as a family and we'd be like, okay, what are two things you're grateful for today? And Leah would call, like Ava's like, I'm grateful for my family, grateful for my house, blah blah blah, and she's 8, so
Mhm.
that's, that makes sense. But
Mhm.
Leah's like, and it can't be the general life stuff. It's got to be deeper than that. I'm like,
Mhm.
yes. So yeah, yep, you hit the nail on the head. Gratitude's for self.
Mhm.
I love that.
There was something I was going to say too, and then I totally. Oh, when you said something, and then you were like, "That's when my heart and solar plexus were really working together." And I just find it so amazing, and I want to remind people that that thought process doesn't happen with everyone, including me. And I work with chakras, but not to the depth that you do. And I love that when something happens in your life, you obviously related to, oh, this is solar plexus chakra that I need to work. What can I do to do that? And with me, and I think with some of our clients, I was going to say average people, but we're all average people, but we start to do this work automatically, not realizing, oh, I'm working on this. And like our bodies know, our souls know, we know what we need, we know what we have to do. But I love that you just like when I experienced all that loss last year, I wasn't like, I got to do some heart chakra work. It's not what came to
Mhm.
mind. I just started a little bit of self-care and felt better and continued.
Yep. It's funny because I don't. I guess it's in my work that has allowed them to be a part of my conversation, and I didn't. Thank you for saying that, because I guess I didn't realize to the extent that I have allowed them to infuse into my life, and
Yeah.
that I allowed for my own experience in them, because my experience may not be the same as everybody else. Um, and we get to have our own experiences in them. Um, and I guess it's just because I see them on a regular basis at work, but
But
I
you're such a
remember,
great reminder for me. Like that's a compliment. I'm like, oh, I need some of that. That's a part of me. Chakras are a part of us, our energy. Why aren't we talking about them like we would our hand or our foot,
right?
Mm.
And I remember in the beginning when I first started doing and taking classes and doing work, there wasn't a whole lot of, I got confused by them often. And I found myself like, okay, for example, addiction, does it happen in this chakra or does it happen in this chakra? And I found myself when I first dove in and started doing this work, I didn't know about the chakras and I felt lost in them a little bit because I felt like I was doing one thing with one chakra and then somebody else would mention it somewhere, just like we talked about with the heart and the throat. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm seeing it wrong. And it
Right.
would trigger that lack of self-worth. I'm wrong, I'm seeing it wrong, I'm doing it wrong. So I appreciate that within that process of moving through that lack of self-worth, it actually helped me dive into finding my own rhythm
Yeah.
and
And
that we
nothing
each
is a
get to.
neat little box. I'm sorry, I didn't hear
No,
you.
you're exactly right.
Nothing is boxed up neatly. Things slip into the chakras, meld into each other. Energy is energy. It goes,
Yep.
sneaks in other places too.
And I think that's where it's good to, now that we get to have this conversation, it's good to invite in an experience of our energy first before we dive into the book learning. And I appreciate these conversations on a very personal level because I have a group of courses. And one of them that I am working on refining is the energetic self care course. And it's about how energy shows up in our body. And it's really fundamental foundation, just basic concepts of how energy moves through our body. And then I dive into the unique chakra series where we talk about chakras and we talk about them individually. And then hopefully next year we get into the third level, which is deep dive into our own personal experience in the chakras. However, I found myself questioning what I had laid out because does it fit that book learning that everybody else has out there? And for me, it feels like it doesn't have to fit the book learning because this has been my experience and I get to share that. So that's a bit of a tangent, but thank you for that because that is very
Can we
validating.
pause for 1 second?
Absolutely. So I guess in general, I appreciate this conversation for recognizing that I feel like our chakras, we, oh, my headphones are getting low. I feel like the chakras that we experience, our energy and our chakras, we get to experience the energy and take the knowledge nuggets that we have in the world around us and take in what fits into our energy versus trying to fit our energy into the exterior knowledge. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, totally.
Cool. Alrighty. Um, so how are some of the ways you like to work with your heart chakra?
Well, like we talked about before, I am a piece of jewelry wearer, and when I know a chakra needs work, then I usually put something like rose quartz for that the heart chakra on. That is really crunchy.
Okay, so I had to switch headphones because my other ones were dying. So I would love for you to touch base again, Danielle, in case there's lots of noise that was over top of you.
Yeah,
How
I'm
do you
sure it was
work with your
fine.
heart chakra?
So again, for me, I like to go to crystals. I like to wear something. For me, it's an intention. When I see it, it's a reminder of my intention to do work in a certain chakra. When I feel it against my skin, I remember. Um, Also, again, things that make me go inward for the heart chakra. So something like yoga or walking, that doesn't have a lot of outside stimuli, but something that makes me connect that heart and mind to go inward to feel what's in my heart.
Hmm. I love that. Yes. For me personally, it's always meditation.
Mm,
Um, Not always meditation, but meditation and energy work. Like that's where I start. And I found that like those times where the rumination is going and I can't get into the meditation, that's I think one of the reasons why I picked up EFT tapping because that gives me something for that rumination to focus on so that I then can go in there. Yes, with the jewelry, I have bracelets and I don't have one on today, but I will usually the bracelet honors the energy that I want to welcome into my life and it
mhm.
sets a reminder. And often the pink and green that I wear on my bracelet remind that heart work. I'm also a fan of listening to heart chakra music.
Mm,
I find that that really helps. I don't know. I feel like it accents that vibe. And authentically sharing out loud in a
yeah.
safe, vulnerable space. So
Mhm.
having a friend that I can call or reach out to, and I can be raw and angry and then talk beyond that.
Mhm.
And where it's not just surface level, it's okay, it's gonna all be okay. You know what I mean? Like there's validation and there's acknowledgement and there's processing and there's in-depth talking. Those are the places that I really do the heart work, because when I can let it out what I'm feeling on the surface, I can start to see what's underneath it. So having
Right.
space to process that is a huge heart chakra energy for me. And
Mhm.
it's funny because I that's so authentic to me that I enjoy creating space for that with clients. And because I do that naturally, it's hard for me personally sometimes to understand when people don't do that.
Yeah. I was just thinking this because I've witnessed you go through that, and you have helped me so many times go through that. And you are excellent at holding space for someone to be able to be vulnerable. And you are also good at asking questions that you never force answers to. And you always say, you don't have to answer this, but there's such good, meaty, juicy questions. And I'm like, oh, she's right. But it gets you over that angry, frustrated, sad part in moving into now I want to work through this. Now I want to know, like for me, it sets a fire inside to go through this. Now, once you give me one of those or two of those or more questions, and I'm like, oh yeah, because I really like the work like you like the work. I understand not everyone connects to it and needs time to do it, but I appreciate how gently you allow people to do it in their own time, but it just makes me want to do it faster. So I really appreciate it because then I can get out of that mood faster.
Right. And I think that it's completely okay if that's not the way people do things. Like
Mm-hmm.
some people very much are not there. That's because I'm such when I experience energy emotionally. I feel like that leans into that habit a little bit more. But I feel like some people feel it more physically or
Yeah.
mentally. So what helps them process that energy in the heart may be completely different. And we're all at different capacities for how we dive into things. And
Sure.
on a personal level, because that's kind of what I do at work, is create space for that. Like I have to learn, and then again, heart chakra boundaries, I get it. I have to respect others' boundaries, that they're just not there and they don't, you know what? We're here in the house having dinner, or we're just here having a conversation in the store. I don't need to process my deep inner heart work right now.
Right,
And I'm
right.
like, okay, stop working.
And I know people who go out for a run when they're suffering from something like that.
Yep.
Instead of working through it mentally, they want to work through it physically, at least for a time.
And I think that there also is getting out and running, getting
Hmm.
out and laughing, getting out, like watching a stupid comedy when you're moving through some of this heavy, hard energy can be
Yeah,
really powerful to anchor you into reality versus get you lost within. And
absolutely.
I
When
need people to
we had a
remind me of
year
that.
anniversary of a loss from last year come up recently, and I wanted to go out with my friends because I wanted to laugh and be surrounded by people who I loved and I can be vulnerable with. And someone else in my family didn't, and they chose to stay back and be alone. And I'm like, all right, if that's how you need to process it, then you do that. But you're right, I wanted to go out and have a good time. Not that I wasn't thinking about it, but it just takes some of that
You
pain out. It's
process
just two
differently.
different ways to process the day.
Yep. And I think that that's where that could lead to kind of a bigger worldview of why people are shutting down their heart more, because it is such a vulnerable thing to be authentic to what we're feeling in our heart. We want validation that it's okay that we experience it that way. And when we
Right.
put it out in the world for that validation and we don't receive that validation back, it trips us into, I'm wrong, this is wrong, I'm doing it wrong, I can't share it with the world. Because
Mhm.
there's so many people seeking validation through things like social media and
Mhm.
in media in general, that we forget to just simply allow space is validation alone.
Right.
Hmm. Oh, see, I could totally dive into so many deep conversations about the heart.
That's why you
So,
have to give the heart chakra a whole night.
right, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so I feel like, I don't know, I'm just going to put this out there that I feel like one of the great tips for people when we talk about all of this chakra work and for the people that this is all new for, I feel like a simple activity that you could do is set a 5-minute timer on your phone, play your favorite meditation music, be it ocean waves, heart chakra energy, flute, whatever. Place your hands on your heart and witness your breath in your body for 5 minutes. And I feel like your breath and your hands on your heart are starting to acknowledge the energy of your heart. And I feel like that's a really great foundational 5-minute easy activity that people can do to lean into this work a little bit more.
100%. Even just you talking about it, I felt my shoulders relax and I felt a relaxation sensation in my chest just listening to you talk about it.
Right, right.
Mm.
Cool. So, before I dive into who knows God what next, shall we draw some cards?
Sure, sure. I went back to cartomancy. I was, in hindsight, I probably should have pulled some heart chakra cards out, but I did not.
Do
So
you have cards specifically for the chakras?
I do have a chakra deck that has seven. Well, actually, I have two different chakra decks. One card, I think, has 4 cards for each chakra, and the other deck, and one deck has it, and the other deck has 7 cards for each chakra.
I need to get some of those now.
Yeah.
It's funny because originally, like when I first started open up to chakras, those would have been helpful, but would have also been confusing. So that if like those cards say one thing and I read somewhere else, I would have questioned my ability in the chakras.
There's just a word. On each
Okay.
card is just a word, but there's books that go along. One of the decks that I happen to use a lot has illustrations, and for me, they're very childlike. However, whatever it is in them just prompts things in me and I connect to it. Even though I'm not a huge fan of the artwork, I don't know what it is about the energy of that deck, but I just connect with it. And, so whatever comes from me, I read intuitively. So whatever comes up, comes up. I don't care what the word on the card is, but.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's so funny. I was talking to Leah last night. This is a little bit of a right left turn or hard right turn. But she has, like, we've been talking about decks and exploring different things and using them in personal practice and what have you. And she's an artist. And I told her a while ago that she could totally draw paintings and I'd make a deck of cards out of them. And I thought of your deck that you have that you've taken pictures of. And I told her, I said, you could illustrate your own deck of cards, your
Yes,
own
that'd be
oracle deck
great.
of cards. And she's like, oh, I could. I didn't feel like telling her. I would so dive into that deck. But anyway, so do you want to go first or do you want me to?
Well, I was pulling cards while you were talking just to ask what is it that the people listening to this podcast, what else could we tell them or what do they need to know about how to work with the chakra? And I I I guess I'll tell you what the cards are. I got the Ace of Spades, Two of Clubs, Queen of Diamonds, Eight of Clubs, and Three of Diamonds. So there's not any emotion cards in here, which was the first thing that struck me as weird. But to me, it just says when you're facing uncertainty, when you're facing challenges. The Two of Clubs for me is very much about merging things. So maybe it's merging the work, maybe it's merging crystals and breath work and different things to help get you back to center. But my favorite part about this pull is the Three of Diamonds, and that's very much the support card for me personally. And making sure that you are reach out to someone, like you said, a trusted friend, someone you could be authentic with, someone you could be vulnerable with. I feel like this is just validating everything we just said, but just to there's a tarot card that keeps coming to mind every time I look at this Queen of Diamonds, and it's the Queen of Pentacles in tarot, and she just has the most beautiful, peaceful look on her, like she is completely in control, even if her world is not in control. And it's just a beautiful, serene card. So I feel like in order to get back to that space, like you said, closing your eyes, working with your breath, using your tools, that's what's going to help you get there.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, I feel like that's really inspiring with the notion that we get into these places on multiple levels, so we get out of them in multiple ways.
Sure.
That's a really great valid point. Thank you. I am going to draw a card from the Soul's Journey deck by James Van Prague, and I'm looking for a card that honors our work with our heart chakra today. We're going to go, I can't spread them way out, but we're going to go in the middle. Happiness. Okay, so when I first pull this card out, it's upside down. The first thing that sticks out with me is this green color, because green is a color of the heart chakra. However, because it's reversed, it's reminding us that maybe we don't have to do the heavy work. Maybe we get to have fun and be a little playful, and that there is an intuitive knowing and wisdom that we connect with, or an inner knowing that we connect with within our heart that happens when we allow ourselves some fun, when we allow ourselves those moments of happiness. Yes, there's a lot of heavy, deep, powerful work we do through our heart, but there's also authentic healing energy we experience when we play and when we laugh and when we allow those happy moments in our life. And those happy moments are not something that we get as a reward for finishing the work and completing the tasks. They are a key piece in how we live a solid, authentic life. So bringing in those notions feels very important, and they only help with the journey within, not take away from that journey within. The phrase that he has on the bottom of this card is, I am aware that being happy means that I am on the right path. So
I love that it's intertwined with the blue, the throat chakra, and everything that you're talking about, the playing, the laughing, it's all self-expression, throat chakra.
Yep. Very cool. So there we are, people. That is our heart chakra conversation. I would love to invite you, Danielle. Do you want to share something you're working on currently?
I think because I brought it up today, maybe I'll just remind people that I'm offering a new service for not only pet communication, but for pet grief counseling. And if people need a safe space to reach out and help process those emotions, that is something I am currently doing.
I love that. I love that. And it is, you're so right. The death of a pet feels so different and gets to have its own space. I don't know which one to share. I have a unique chakra series coming up in November. It's a class that's where we dive into each chakra just a little bit more. We go through the physical body chakras, the heart, and the spiritual body chakras. So if you want more information on that, it starts November 4th. Also, I kind of feel like I need to want to highlight the intuitive contemplation sessions. They're a little bit different than your typical intuitive reading, where we join together and have a guided intuitive conversation where we can pull up the questions and have that conversation about how we can dive in to get to know what's underneath it a little bit more. And that feels very much like a true heart chakra work right there. So I'm just going to throw that out there too. Yeah, so there we go. There's our conversation about the heart chakra, which is the 5th in the series of 8. We encourage you to share this with a friend and hang out for the next few weeks as we visit the throat, the brow, and the crown. Any other last thoughts?
No, I'm excited to get there.
I know, right? Absolutely.
I'm excited to go to the next 3. I love that, we're taking each one, but just a little excited for the next 3 coming up.
Absolutely. I'd have to say, I think I'm most excited about the crown today. But anyway, we'll see you then. Thank you very much and have a uniquely beautiful day.